So greetings, hello, nice to talk to you again. I want to continue developing my theme that I've spoken about in the last few talks I've done for the World Congress of Philosophy in Beijing and others, when I've been talking about the impact of global philosophy on contemporary world issues. And this is, you're being introduced into a kind of workshop of a contemporary philosopher who's also engaged with solving contemporary global problems. I've never been one of those philosophers that just abstract themselves in a study and never come out and write learned papers that only 10 people read. I think that's not a genuine intellectual, it's not actually a true philosopher. What attracted me to philosophy when I first discovered it back in my teens was the engaged intellectual. My mother and my family, we were from a tradition of let's say the engaged intellectual. Sartre was one of my mother's heroes, a French philosopher who felt that philosophy is not only about very complicated intellectual grapplings with reality and existence, but also then applying those findings to contemporary world problems, and he was active. Another model was Bertrand Russell in Britain, who was active in the anti-nuclear movement that my family was involved with, and I remember as a boy seeing Bertrand Russell in demonstration for peace. So it's really by those kind of influences that I've ended up coordinating Philosophers of Peace across Europe. And as Vice President of the international group of philosophers concerned with peace, I mean, I'm always shocked and surprised there aren't more. To me, every single philosopher should be, first and foremost, thinking up ways to make peace on this planet. We live under the shadow of a third world war and nuclear exchange, which would be absolutely catastrophic. That would be the death of humanity. Why aren't there more peace studies departments? Why aren't there more philosophers debating and discussing this? It remains to be an absolute puzzle, especially when you look back on the history of philosophy, and most of the great philosophers have actually been very deeply involved in peace. So Pythagoras, it was the centre of his mission, really. He was half Phoenician, half Greek. He wanted to reconcile all the cultures of the ancient world. He wanted to go around all the different temples of Greece and Phoenicia and Egypt and as far as Babylon and southern Italy and find the wisdom of each of them and then reconcile them in a grand schema of ultimate truth. So there's the truth of your tribe, your temple, your particular temple, your deity, whatever. But then there's the ultimate truth which transcends and unites them all. That's what he meant by philosophy, and he was one of the first intellectuals to use the term. It's in that sense that I resonated with this. You also have great thinkers like Descartes later in the wars of the Enlightenment era, or the Proto-Enlightenment. Descartes, although brought up a Catholic in France, and although he fought in the 30 Years' War from time to time, he was at the tragic Battle of the White Mountain when Frederick and the Protestant cause was defeated, Frederick the Winter King. I don't think he was a combatant, but he was there at the battle. He eventually, just withdrew, and he went to live in Amsterdam, which was then the most vibrant intellectual centre of Europe, and it was a Protestant city. And Descartes thought up most of his great ideas living in a Protestant country. It's rumoured he was interested in Rosicrucianism. Some people have researched this as well. The Rosicrucians stood for a kind of transcendental unity between Protestants and Catholics. And it's sad that Frederick, the Winter King, and Elizabeth of the Palatinate was one of the centres for this Rosicrucian ideal that came partly from James. James VI, or James I of England, Scotland, Wales and Ireland, was himself a kind of Rosicrucian monarch and a philosopher king, really. Another great thinker who influenced me is Francis Bacon, who devoted a lot of his writings to the king, King James. And James wanted to go down in history as the peace king. He saw the uniting of the English and Scottish crowns in his person on the death of Queen Elizabeth as a kind of symbol of peace. Look, if we can make it in this microcosm of our islands, the British Isles, then the whole of Europe has hope for peace. And he desperately tried to prevent the 30 Years' War happening. How was he going to do it? Well, he took his Anglican mission seriously, and he said, I'm both Catholic and Protestant. He was baptised a Catholic, son of Mary Queen of Scots, but he was raised a Protestant, i.e. a kind of dissident intellectual. And he said, that's fine, I'm both. I'm a Protestant Catholic or a Catholic Protestant. And he thought that by marrying off his children to Protestant and Catholic heirs in Europe, he could guarantee peace. Tragically, it didn't happen, did it? Francis Bacon, however, thought that by the advancement of learning, which was his project, inspired by the king, if we develop a new methodology of knowledge, i.e. science, scientific method, we can then get peace on this planet by fully understanding one another, our civilizations, where we're coming, where we're going, etc. So Bacon's great work, The Advancement of Learning, was really actually intended as a peace initiative. And it inspired me when I first set up my institute at the University of London back in the early 90s. But where are we now? So all these great philosophers have been working for peace. Not enough of us, but there's a few left. And there are colleagues all over the planet that are interested in this. What are we missing? What have we missed out? That's what I want to address in this short talk. And some of you know that I've been publishing ever since 1993 a journal dedicated to love. It's the main flagship journal of my Peace Institute, which was set up at the University of London. And I still think the rationale behind that is valid today. And I just want to start with that. This talk is like an Ouroboros. I'm going to come back to that at the end. It occurred to me in '92 when I went around the States. I was invited to go and lecture at the United Nations headquarters on the role of universities in developing peace studies. I went to California and trained as a mediator. I went to the Deep South, I went to New Orleans, and I explored California and New England. I went to Harvard and so on. And wherever I went, I interviewed intellectuals, great thinkers and academics who were developing peace research, peace studies. And I asked them, what is peace? I recorded the interviews. I've still got the tapes. If I had enough hours in the day, I would like to release them all. Many of these people are now dead, tragically. And I was also interested in the academic study of love as a discipline, as a field. Because, obviously, if we're going to get rid of conflict and violence on the planet, we have to understand what love is. And yet it's the great unknown. And I was absolutely surprised to find there's not a single academic journal in the world that I could find dedicated to the study of love in any way, scientifically, psychologically, religiously even, or philosophically. So, like a young Don Quixote, I said, well, that's what we'll do. We'll launch one. And it's been going ever since. It's now coming up to its 13th issue. And it comes out, periodically. But this is relevant, I think, because each of the great religions, which I've studied and taught for many years, affirms that ultimate reality is somehow made of love. There's something behind matter, behind tangible matter, which is a will, a purpose, an intention, an effective organising principle. And it seems to me that love is a good word for the organising principle in human relationships, also in society, and perhaps even in the very fabric of matter. Love is something that all organic species seem to understand. My cat, birds, when they fly, you can see they love. And it seems to be a sort of word we use for a resonance that's set up between one being and the energy field that surrounds that being, and then that another being of a compatible species, then they co-resonate. And they create, I think, what's some kind of a waveform. Now, the subtle energy metaphysics and physics of this are as yet unexplored. People that have studied things like Tantra and advanced, esoteric sexuality say that, like Reich was beginning to do, that when people make love, they generate an energy field between them, which can literally move mountains. It's a miraculous energy field. It can be transformative. And I think there are mysteries in that field, which Chinese Taoist sages knew and understood when they practiced, and also Hindu tantrics and Druids and all other kind of experts in the ancient mysteries. Why have we lost that? Well, we've just had an amazing conference here in Bétet in France, and in the south of France, in the amazing Languedoc-Occitan, dedicated to the study of Mary Magdalene. And I think that in Christianity, some of these mysteries to do with love have ended up becoming verboten, forbidden, because Mary Magdalene was suppressed within the canon of Christianity. And very soon after Christ's tragic death, crucifixion, the male hierarchy took over, Peter, and the disparagement of Mary Magdalene seems to have begun. The hypothesis we've been exploring in the Mary Magdalene Studies Association is that maybe Mary Magdalene was one of an inner group of more Gnostic disciples of Jesus, which I would include Thomas and John. There was an inner core, not the political heavyweights of Peter and James, who were the public face, but the inner core who got the actual inner message. And I think Mary Magdalene was part of that. So the secrets of love that Jesus would have shared with her, we've lost. Or the argument is maybe it was handed down verbally, orally, within a more Gnostic branch of the church. I like that proposal, and there is a Gnostic tradition that the Gnostic church survived. We know that there was a Gospel of Mary Magdalene, which has been found in Egypt, and it's been translated. Well, we only have a few fragments. I've done a commentary on it in great detail. And I think that the more we can explore these mysteries of love within esoteric Christianity, the more the churches will again become vibrant places of not just worship, but knowledge and study. When you go into a synagogue, there's a whole library of books that are available in one section of the synagogue. Every synagogue I've ever been in, and I've been in loads in Israel and London and wherever, the understanding is that a synagogue is a house of study as well as a house of prayer. Synagogue is actually a Greek word. It means the place where things come together. So the rabbi is there as a teacher. Actually, the word rabbi simply means teacher. So any person, Jewish or not actually, but normally Jews, will go to the synagogue, not just to do ritual prayers, sing hymns, etc., but also for study. So there's always a library there. Why isn't there in Christian churches? It's ridiculous. You find a hymn book and the order of service book. I would love every church in the world to have a good library, and its core library should include not just the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, but also the Gospel of Thomas and the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and things like the books of Enoch, which are other esoteric books. They're in the Ethiopian Bible. The first book of Enoch is. Why not in the Protestant or Catholic Bibles? There was a decision taken by fiat in Rome, a bureaucratic decision, to exclude the Book of Enoch because it was too mysterious, too esoteric. Well, with all due respect, we've got to grow up, folks. We can't save this planet if we're going to be Sophia-phobic like that. The spiritual masters of this planet have got to get together and find ways of gently persuading the bureaucrats of knowledge that their time is gone. There's two types of intellectuals: the inspired geniuses, who are the real ones, and then there's the kind of the pretend intellectuals, the fake ones, who often hold power in academia and in the institutions of learning on the planet. And that's why the planet's going down, because we can never save it with mere bureaucracy. The church, to be truly inspired again, has to become a place filled with the Holy Spirit, which the Pentecostalists talk about, it's something that makes you speak in tongues. As a man of reason, as an Anglican, I would say it's also a place that makes you think deeply and rationally and truly about fundamental and ultimate matters. So the Holy Spirit is the feminine side of God, and we need all our reasoning faculty, our intellect, to make sense of it. So yes, there should be a library in every church, and commentaries and texts on all these Gospels. They're precious. We only have fragments. It's a miracle that we found them. I think if the Gnostic traditions are brought back into mainstream Christianity, I think they're meta-orthodox. There's a big fight going on in Christianity, and has been for centuries, over what is a heretic, what is orthodox. Are you a genuine Christian or are you not? And, you know, ever since Irenaeus of Lyon, the big fear has been, are you a heretic? I think that's totally the wrong question. I mean, that was what Christ was accused of being. Christ was a heretic in law, but, you know, not in cosmic law. And we have to take our stand on cosmic law, or Dharma, as it's called in Buddhism and Hinduism. And so Christ's witness was for the re-empowerment of every individual on the planet to enlightenment, to Christification, which is what baptism symbolises, and to becoming a child of God. You can use different imagery, you know, to be born again, to enter the kingdom of God. But what is that? What does it actually mean? Well, that's described in the more Gnostic literature, and also in a deeper understanding, a hermeneutic of the conventional scriptures. I mean, you don't need to read the Gnostic scriptures. You can read, as it says in the Church of England, 39 articles. You know, all that you need is in the biblical text. But you do have to read them with new eyes. We need a much deeper hermeneutic, an interpretative framework to make sense of these texts. So that's what I've been doing. And if you find out, if you look into them in detail, and I invite you to listen to my commentaries on these texts, which are available on my Green University website, in great detail, you'll find that they're about love. So, you know, if we go deeply into this study, we come back to that ultimate question of love. And it's our own identity that we come to, because each child on this planet, each being, is a child, literally, of love. Now, to use an Aristotelian terminology, we could say that love is the telos that exists at the heart of matter. Telos is the purpose for which something is programmed. The telos is to find fulfillment in love for each thing, whatever it be, from a mosquito to an ant to a whale to a dinosaur to a human. And with humans, I think we need to understand all the different shades and nuances of love. So there's intellectual love, there's emotional feelings of connectedness, there's you know, love and telepathy are connected. I've always found this interesting. Lovers can feel and think at a distance. How is that possible? What is the substance of consciousness that makes telepathy possible? That's connected with the mystery of love. Okay, so this is all very well, but how is this applied to political science? I want to just shift gear a little bit here, because as a philosopher, I'm interested in the highest metaphysical, most rarefied questions, but also in grounding them and bringing them to bear on the political realities we face as a world. And political science, I don't think, is living up to its calling. I've just been to Bordeaux and sat at the feet of Montesquieu, the great author of The Spirit of the Laws. I went to see his tomb, and I was communing with his spirit. He was way ahead of his time, a great thinker of the Enlightenment, who tried rationally to sort out what power is and how it can be best distributed. What are the forms of power in society, and how can we ensure that there isn't an absolutism, a domination of an over-concentration of power in some aspects of governance, that it can be distributed and shared. We need to do a new Montesquieu. We need to revisit the Spirit of the Laws, and this time to take on board all the different religious traditions and all the different spiritual approaches to law, as well as the sociological and philosophical study of law. We have to, unfortunately, we seem to have entered a post-legal world in which lawlessness between and among nations, and even within nations, is becoming the new normal. We've just witnessed the death of Kofi Annan, the great Secretary General of the UN. And I've spoken twice at the UN headquarters. I have a lot of friends who've worked there. I think I've corresponded with Kofi Annan in the past. Certainly friends of mine have been quite close to him. I never met him personally for a chat. But I think he was a genuine diplomat of the highest order who worked for peace. And yet they're becoming a rarity now. And so how do we challenge? I mean, I was listening to an excellent lecture by Chomsky, who's an American intellectual I greatly respect. And he was complaining, he was saying the solution for the problems of America and its apparent inability to do anything right, you know, are very simple. All America has to do is start following international law again. They've come off the rails because in actions such as the bombing and invasion of Iraq in 2003, in actions that he itemises that Clinton did and other presidents, in threatening Iran and so on, and also in backing Israel's takeover of Palestinian land by building illegal settlements, which they are in international law illegal, and selling Israel huge numbers of weapons. Chomsky points out that even during the bombings in Gaza, when the population of Gaza is like 40% under 17, they're kids mostly, and yet Israelis are bombing them with these huge shells, and they were doing it so much they were running out. So America immediately got new weapons to them. Now this is colluding in international war crimes. So what Chomsky is saying, and I would back this, is that we need to start having respect for international law again. Now the realist, the cynic, will say, well, that's fine, but who's going to enforce that? America is the only superpower left on the planet, and what they say goes. And if they want to collude in bombing Gaza, or if they want to collude in Israeli gradual takeover of the entire West Bank territory and the eradication of any possible future Palestinian state, who's going to stop them? I think eventually, you see, people's conscience is what kicks in. Jeremy Bentham, one of the great founders of my university, the University of London, an international legal scholar and philosopher, said that ultimately public opinion is what transforms society gradually in the direction of progress. As we become more educated, and this is where things like the internet are so important, and publications and the printing press and newspapers and the publishing industry. This is why ultimately we will win, and that was Bentham's hope and faith, and it's mine too. That's why I bother being a public educator. So public opinion will gradually, I think, ask people to re-examine the premise that they're operating from. It seems to me that some people on the planet think that preemptive militarism is the only way to guarantee international order, i.e. having the biggest stick. So Netanyahu, perhaps Trump, he's still a bit of a dark horse, because on the one hand he was saying before the election he wants to have a commission and understand what happened at 9/11. I think he genuinely actually doesn't want World War III. He doesn't want to be the president that blows the world up. I think his preference would be for peace. But he's, as a businessman, his instinct is to go with the most powerful people, which is ironically why he's attracted to people like Putin. So I think the jury's out whether Trump can be persuaded to see that peace is better for business. I would argue that that peace is always going to be much more profitable for a country in the long term than war. And obviously, unfortunately, the public association of war is with economic progress. Have a few wars, you sell lots of stuff, you can dominate, you can capture the oil. This is the kind of post hoc justification given for the Iraq invasion in the Anglo-American sphere. But it's totally bogus and false, because you lose friends, especially by making wars that are illegal. You lose friends, you lose influence, you lose credibility, you lose long-term trading connections. Nobody's going to buy your cars. There is the tragedy that there was an American CIA asset, Susan Lindauer, who was desperately trying to prevent the American invasion of Iraq. She had got a deal negotiated between Saddam Hussein and certain back channels in America whereby sanctions would end. This is after 9/11 and before 2003. Sanctions would end, oil would start flowing, and Saddam would buy huge numbers of American cars for his people in Iraq. And this would save the American automobile industry. He wanted to help General Motors, cities like Detroit that were collapsing. It was a brilliant plan. It would have worked both for America and for Iraq. So instead of having a war, Iraq and America could have had a peace treaty. That's what Susan Lindauer was trying to negotiate. read her autobiography, and instead she was incarcerated in a cell on a naval Air Force base under psychiatric abuse. So she was force-fed drugs and called crazy. Absolutely scandalous what was done to her. Now, the people that do this kind of thing think they can get away with it, and that they have complete impunity. They're above the law, never be punished. It's our job as intellectuals, as philosophers, to be on their tail, like terriers. And, I've just watched the latest Mission Impossible film with Tom Cruise. I love Tom Cruise. I love those movies. That's kind of what the philosopher is we're on a mission impossible to prevent these idiots blowing up the world. It's as simple as that. Our tools, unlike Tom Cruise, we can't go leaping around on buildings. But what we have to do is leap around in ideas in the noetic world. The job of the philosopher is to prevent these catastrophes happening. This is why I'm engaged with an Indian Swami, a wonderful man called Swami Chaturvedi, in helping launch the World Intellectual Forum. Our vision is a forum like the World Economic Forum, where the greatest intellectuals of the planet, from every culture, every religion, every faith, every race, every continent, come together once a year, or maybe more often, and have a global think tank around the big issues: peace, equity, social justice, gender, and love. Philosophers means someone who loves wisdom. How can you love wisdom if you don't even know what love is? It's central. It's central. So the World Intellectual Forum is the kind of mission impossible for intellectuals. And of course, so many so-called intellectuals won't come. They're not interested. They're what I call the bureaucrats of knowledge. They sit in their little trenches, develop their expertise in whatever it is, some former thinker, and have a very nice academic career. Thank you very much. That's not what the World Intellectual Forum's about. It's for people. They may well be successful academics. They may not be academics. They may have gone an independent route, like Rousseau. Where are today's Rousseaus, the free thinkers, the free intellectuals, the free spirits? Even Nietzsche gave up on his intellectual career. Marx never had an intellectual career as an academic. But these made significant contributions to the history of the human mind. Sometimes you have to go outside academia to do fresh thinking. They're welcome also to join our work. And the idea is to come together and debate and discuss these really important issues. We're having a meeting here in Paris, in France, and here in Bétet, to which all European intellectuals who are interested in bigger picture matters are invited by invitation only. But if you're interested, apply. Now, another thing that I've been thinking about a lot, musing about, is why bother with peace studies? Does it matter? Why not do war studies? I remember going to talk to Lawrence Freedman, who was Professor of War Studies at the University of London when I was a student there, at King's College, and I was working on the project to set up a Peace Studies Institute at the University of London. I went to interview him, as I did all the senior scholars involved in this field. And I said, Lawrence, do you want to be involved with our work? Will you join the committee? Are you happy to help? And he looked at me very scathingly and said, Thomas, sorry, no, because I don't believe in peace. There's no such thing as peace. It doesn't exist. Look at the historical record. There is no such thing as peace. There is only war. And therefore you have to study war studies. Now, he was an extremely successful academic, professor of war studies. He built up King's College into a great centre for defence studies. And I've kept in touch with them. I know what they do. And then he became a member of the Privy Council in Britain, and was then elected to, or nominated to, the Chilcot Commission of Inquiry into the Iraq War. But I have a concern that thinkers like Lawrence Freedman fail to understand the importance of peace. Literally, it's a blind spot. The point I made to him, and I still make to war studies experts, is, you see, it's very easy actually to study war. We can count the number of dead, we can look at the divisions, how they were deployed, we can study the strategy. It's complex, but it's fairly simple. It's not much of an academic chore. But what about when the fighting stops, when the war's over, right? What's the point of the war? And I got Lawrence to agree to me that the point of the war I was kind of guiding him down a bit of a Socratic path here. The point of war is actually to secure victory. Okay, and why do we want to secure victory? Well, paradoxically, so that we can then create peace. So we have a war to win, and then we make peace. But the study of what kind of a peace it's going to be, and why can't we just leapfrog straight to the peace? So let's look at the Iraq War, 2003. Hundreds of thousands of people died. Iraq was devastated ecologically, environmentally, sociologically. American troops were devastated. There's been a higher death rate from suicide by combatants than actually dying on the battlefield. People are still committing suicide because they fought in the Iraq War of 2003. And all the subsequent insurgency battles that took place during the occupation. And even today, I read in Le Monde that ISIL are reforming in Iraq. 30,000 fighters have reformed Islamic resistance groups. It's a never-ending war, which was triggered by that wrong invasion policy in 2003. So, why not immediately go for peace? Why didn't the thinkers in Whitehall, why didn't the academics advising the then government, Tony Blair, etc., say, actually, this invasion will be a catastrophe? Why don't we send in some development experts, educators, mediators, peace advisors, diplomats, Kofi Annan types, and see if we can talk Saddam into, a peace deal before needing to invade. And of course it could have been done, and that's what Susan Lindau was trying to do. So, unfortunately, they were completely ignored. The peace strategy has never been tried. This is why I've also set up in my institute, under its umbrella, what's called the Centre for Peace Policy Research. Because we have military policy. People like Lawrence Freedman do war studies, military policy, security studies, security policy. And there are think tanks and institutes all over the Western world. Basically, they're all asking, how can we defeat our enemy better? What new weapons do we need? How can we destroy them even more cleverly? Well, I'm saying this is totally the wrong question to be asking. Yes, of course we need a sort of defence force, but it should be very minimal, like in Switzerland or Sweden or something. What we should be thinking about is how can we make peace with different countries around the world? How can we end the wars in the Middle East that have been triggered by the false invasions of 2003 and elsewhere, in order to prevent these people having to leave their homes? It's in the long-term interests of the European Union and Britain and America and every country that peace is declared in the Middle East. So that's why I've called for a Centre for Peace Policy Research. We won't get peace till we have proper minds, genuine academics, genuine scientists, thinking about peace policy. And that is absolutely central to the work I'm trying to promote. But you come up against this. We can't do that because we have huge problems with the Middle East, because it's the locus of the great religions. We have Judaism and the new state of Israel, bashing up against Islamic states. We have Islam and we have Christians. How can we possibly resolve that? Okay, I'm going to address that in my next talk, but I hope I've given you some food for thought in this brief survey. Thank you for listening.